of us to play a role. And we invite you to be part of how we assure the safety in our streets so that we do not lose any more of our children or any one more member of our families. And we invite you to be a partner with us, with the Los Angeles Police Department and the City Council, so that we can assure that we create the kind of environments in our communities that we will all be proud of, that we will remain a safe city. And it's important that everybody play a hand in cooperatively working with us to help create an environment that we will all be proud of, creating that safe street environment for our kids and giving them the opportunities to achieve their fullest potential. Thank you.
So I had a personal experience that was quite sad, quite upsetting, and quite angry. I went through my emails yesterday and I found the original email requesting from Nipsey and Rock Nation, requesting to me to set up a meeting with the chief, and I'm going to read it to you. This was dated February 26th. Our goal is to, was sent to me. Our goal is to work with the department to help improve communication, relationships, and work towards changing the culture and dialogue between LAPD and the inner city. We want to hear about your new programs, your goals for the department, as well as how we can help stop gang violence and help you help kids. So it takes time to set up meetings. We did. It was set up for yesterday. And the chief called me on Sunday and told me, this was 15 minutes after, that that Nipsey Hussle had been assassinated and murdered. I was ready for the meeting. I was excited about the meeting. Here was somebody coming in to say, how can we help? How can we be a partner? So Sunday morning, I took out my clothes for Monday. And, what is this called? Save the Children tie. It's all ready to go. And then I got the chief's call. And then I started getting other calls, so I put out a note out of respect, saying that, you know, here, this horrible thing happened one day before we were going to have this meeting. Why couldn't we have had the meeting the day before instead of the day after? And you get 10, 12 people criticize. But to date, on the email, people that have gotten in contact, looked at this, believe in building bridges, 4 million people. 4,015,000 people. So the meeting will happen. It will happen when Rock Nation and Nipsey's family will come together. And I promise you, whether from the upper levels of this or from the bottom level of this, that I want to help do what he wanted to do. And he wanted us to do that. And so did these 4 million people who've contacted me. Thank you.
Finally, Chief Moore will brief the context about this killing as well as crime in South Los Angeles right now, particularly in 77th Division and nearby, and then we'll answer your questions. Chief Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Supervisor, Councilman Marquise Harris-Dawson, Councilman Rodriguez, our community and faith leaders that are with us today, our command staff. We join, as does all of Los Angeles, and a somber day in the aftermath of another senseless homicide of an individual who posed such an opportunity to step into a conversation to help this city work its way through a sickness, a challenge, a seemingly tragic love affair with gun violence. Today's conversation is a broader context because there's moments in time that you have as individuals, whether you be a chief or a police officer or a member of the media or faith leaders, that you look down on a message or you hear a call and you just find it so, like, you take a second guess or you take a second look. Sunday afternoon was that for me. Sunday afternoon, this department in the last 3 months had seen an error where last year we saw the second fewest number of homicides in this city in more than 50 years. We saw a reduction in overall violent and Part 1 crime. We saw 35 fewer gang-related homicides and 59 fewer gang-related shootings. But yet, as I had reported approximately 2 to 3 weeks ago, we began seeing an increase in gang-related violence and in shooting violence that was starting to trend in a manner that was causing us concerns. And as an organization that looks at its safety across this community each day and works to align its resources to identify those locations that need us most, and we partner with our community coalitions, the Watts Gang Task Force. I was yesterday at the Baptist Ministers Conference, at our GRID, Intervention and Prevention Resources. Sunday afternoon, we had those all in play because we had seen a week of violence that even took what we saw in the first couple weeks of March to a higher level, particularly in South Los Angeles. Last Wednesday, we met with the coalition where we talked about, while we had seen an overall reduction in violence, still fewer homicides, more than 300 fewer 300 fewer victims of violent crime, we had seen a recent increase in shooting violence in South Los Angeles, in 77th, and particularly impacting African American men. And it was causing us growing concerns, and we needed those coalitions, those faith leaders, those members of the public that are working to be peacemakers in our communities. We need them to step forward. And Monday, while I was not picking out my clothes on Sunday, I generally wear a pretty pre-designed outfit. But on Sunday, I was looking forward to the Monday conversation because yet it was another opportunity for this department to find ground in which and strategies and advocates and people in our community that could step into a conversation of how to stem this violence. Today, we still are below our all-time highs, but Nipsey Hussle represents the enormity of the lives that we have lost. And I felt, as I looked at that message from LA Fire, that told me we had 3 additional shooting victims that had just occurred at Slauson and Crenshaw. And I began that message as I was reading it, standing on the street, exactly where I was at. And then I saw the name Nipsey Hussle, and I looked at that again, and I looked at it again, and it was like, I could not believe it. It was like, it just drove the added violence even that much more severe. So I am devastated with that because this is a voice that was trying to help and was investing in his community. But I'm also here with an error because on that Sunday earlier that morning, I was with my wife, the New Christian Memorial Church in Pacoima, where Senior Pastor Sandra Croce stands as a bulwark of peace and of finding community safety. And I'm encouraged by that message that Sunday morning of renewal and of not giving up and finding hope. And today, I'm going to talk momentarily about where we're at on this investigation of the man we believe responsible for the killing of Mr. Hussle. But I'm also encouraged by what's happened since this shooting. what has continued over the weekend and into this morning. And that is the community coalitions, the Watts Gang Task Force, COCA, the Nation of Islam, faith leaders, community advocates, grid interventionists, preventionists have stepped up on double to not allow this to be hijacked by an individual who would want to exact further violence. I'm also thankful for the men and women of LAPD who have done on a parallel course. They have investigated this and aggressively, relentlessly, utilizing witness statements, video evidence, crime scene investigation, and we have identified to this point, based on what we know, the individual we believe responsible. And I'm going to provide that information. But simultaneously, our men and women have been in our communities, not just on this shooting violence, this homicide, but other violence in 77th and in South Los Angeles to try to quell further acts. And they have been so while facilitating a vigil on what I believe is sacred ground. And last night, as we saw the night before, with such emotions and such high intensity of people grieving, we can see instances in which turmoil or altercations or fights will erupt. And I'm proud of the men and women of my department working with our faith and community leaders who have facilitated those and at the same time did their best work to provide for the safety. And last night was the most recent example, and today we have redoubled and gone back at this again to have this a community-led vigil. And for those that would attend, now and in the future, I just ask for you to bring peace. Bring peace. And not allow this sacred ground to be the site of any further violence. Now, regarding where we're at on the homicide and the tragic death of Nipsey, we provided a press account last night. Following our investigative efforts, we are currently working with the District Attorney's Office to seek the necessary information to obtain a warrant for his arrest. But we believe with probable cause and degree of certainty that on Sunday at about 3:20 in the afternoon, Nipsey with two other males were standing in front of his store, as has been reported. That Mr. Holder walked up on multiple occasions and engaged in a conversation with Nipsey and the others that were there. He left and then came back and subsequently came back armed with a handgun and purposely and repeatedly fired, striking and killing Nipsey Hussle, as well as striking and injuring the other two. One requiring them to be hospitalized or transported to a nearby hospital, the other suffering a wound but was treated at scene. Mr. Holder, we have identified him through, at this point, the available video evidence, statements, and information that we're getting from our community. And I cannot thank enough that the community is the one who is helping us solve this case. As in every case, it is a community's engagement that makes our lives safer, that provides justice for these victims and their families. Mr. Holder entered the passenger side of a 2016 Chevy Cruze. It's a white four-door vehicle. Its license plate is 7 Robert John David, that's RJD 742. And the vehicle was driven by an unidentified woman. That vehicle was located in the alley adjacent to that mini mall strip center where it fled from the scene. We have, as the mayor indicated, we continue to seek the public's help and assistance twofold. People that were at that scene or have information from people who were at that scene that can help identify further and provide us evidence of the persons responsible for this senseless murder. We ask that you call our South Bureau homicide detectives day or night. You also can use WeTip and Crime Stoppers and report anonymously. We're not done in gathering evidence on this horrific shooting. Secondarily, is we want the public to help us identify and apprehend Mr. Holder. Armed with a handgun this senseless murder, this expression of violence, represents that this is a man who is of a substantial risk to public safety and willing to use violence. And we want to see that stop. And we need the public's help in identifying him, and to Mr. Holder, who I am confident is watching this and is listening to these media accounts as this is spread not only around this region, but around this world. I ask him to surrender, to find a local law enforcement agency, to go to a station and surrender, and to defend himself as he feels appropriate, but to stop this mess, to stop this from continuing. Let me comment just briefly in regards to the context of this increase in violence. So January and February of this year, this city averaged approximately 13 shooting victims a week. And that number, while it may sound high, is actually for Los Angeles Police Department and the Los City of Angels, it was at and below last year's numbers and the year before, substantially. March, we saw that number double to 26 on average. And nearly entirely that increase was in 77th area of South Los Angeles. 77th in January and February experienced just under 5 shootings a week. That number expanded to nearly 15 on average a week in the month of March. Much of it is gang. In fact, nearly all of it is gang related. Nipsey Hussle's death and his tragic shooting, I have no information today that has that involved in this other shooting violence, and that needs to be stressed. What we're seeing here is not just a shooting of a hip-hop artist, a profound individual coming back to give back to his community. What I'm concerned about as chief, and I know our community leaders are as well, is we've got to continue to go at this recent increase in shooting violence, because it's not just a dispute over a personal matter. This is gang violence that we're seeing particularly in South Los Angeles, but also on the west side and in other parts of the city, that we need to redouble our efforts and keep working towards intervening and finding ways of resolving disputes without people resulting to a bullet with no name on it. So with that, the group, we're here to answer questions and concerns. And I remind, as the mayor had indicated, that as we focus a lot of effort and energy in my remarks today and our remarks, that this still remains one of the safest times in Los Angeles. But we don't reach that safety by apathy or minimizing what we have in front of us. Each of these lives matter, and our commitment as a department, our elected officials, who I'm proud of their work and investment, our community and faith leaders, is that we're relentless, and we will not give up in seeing that our communities are safe. Thank you.
Can you give us a better idea about a motive?
At this point,
No, go ahead. Also, I know there's Spanish media here. When we start questions and answers, but I'll say a statement in Spanish at the end for our Spanish media. Go ahead.
so at this point, our investigation